This is part two of the discourse on emergence of cultism among Salafis in the West. And while I don't intend to respond in detail to what followed my discourse, the 19-page rant from Abu Iyad Amjad Rafiq, I will no doubt address some areas there. But one of the signs that we see from cults is that any dissenting voice or criticism of anything they do is met with a barrage of abuse under the guise of religious clarification or knowledge. And if anyone had taken the time to read the 19-page rant, which I certainly haven't got the time for, it's just regurgitating age-old information which has become a mantra for this particular cult. One of the things that we need to look at with cultism and when warning against extremism are observations made by Sheikh Saleh ibn Abdulaziz al-Sheikh after he refers to Surah Al-Baqarah, ayat 143, and we've made you into a just community that you will be witnesses over people and the messenger will be witnesses over you. One of the things he says afterwards is the categorization of people into three types. The first one being the balanced and median people. They're the best who follow the Prophet ﷺ and his companions and the people of knowledge, and they're grounded in knowledge. The second type, they follow futile matters, people of leniency who divide up the commandments of Allah and do not follow the commands of Allah or all of the commands of the Prophet. The third type are the other types who go to extremes and they exceed the limits, crossing the bounds. As the meaning of ghulu, extremism, is exceeding the limits in ascertaining a thing or in achieving that which leads to a thing. So to be extreme means exceeding the limits. Now, it's for the listener to determine which of the three categories this cult falls into. Even the cult followers would have to listen to this. And immediately, as is known of cult members, they think they are the rightly guided and they are pure and they have no mistakes with them, almost to the extent that they are infallible. And they will immediately say, oh, but the person recording this, Abdul Haqq, he fits into one of the other categories, the following the futile matters, the mumayyi'in, as we see some of the wordings that are used towards us from this cult. But this is not about me. We're talking about the cult in itself. So that's who we need to center our focus on. So suffice it to say, there are three categories there which should be looked at and decide where this cult fits. And also, when we look at a paper entitled The Advice, a caution against some newly invented methodologies that have arisen under the banner of Salafiyah. And this was reviewed by Sheikh Wasiullah Abbas, a senior scholar who this cult has continually disrespected. But this isn't a surprise because this cult, when it lies to the scholars it goes to get license and credence against other scholars, and there've been a raft of scholars over the years who they've spoken against, using other scholars' statements, some of them legitimate, some, but not all. We see that they go against Sheikh Wasiullah Abbas and they belittle him and his words and his advice. And he knows them well. He sat with them. There's recordings of that. And he's spoken about that in a lot of detail. But one of the reasons which we don't touch upon, and that's something that is not just peculiar to this cult, but we must be honest, brothers and sisters, it's peculiar to a number of us. We don't give credence or enough credence or relevance to knowledge that comes from scholars who are other than the Arabs. So if the scholar is from Africa originally, or if the scholar is from India originally, or Pakistan, we put them further down the order of priority and hierarchy to the Arab scholars. And there's this inherent racism that's there, okay, from us. I don't know where that's come from, and I'm not going to discuss that in detail. That's something for us to look at. Some will reject it, some will accept it. And I believe that Sheikh Wasiullah is recipient to this racism, this inherent racism from particular quarters of the Salafi community, and especially this cult. But anyway, some of the characteristics that were described in this advice of this particular group, of this cult, is one, lack of concern towards studying and reflecting upon the Quran and authentic Sunnah. Two, their gatherings are devoid of the remembrance of Allah. Three, the resemblance to the Khawarij. And this is interesting here because what is written is what the Khawarij of old had done regarding takfir. We find this group doing the same in the matter of tabdi, declaring someone to be an innovator or person of innovation. They consider people to be out of the fold of Ahl Sunnah based on things which do not necessitate that. Also, the Khawarij of old took the texts pertaining to the Kuffar and applied them to the Muslims. Similarly, this group has taken that which applies to the people of innovation and applied it upon Ahl Sunnah themselves. And there are other descriptors that are there which we won't go into in this particular paper, but I will move on to another cult characteristic. Their criticism of me using social sciences and referring to social sciences. Abu Iyad himself has a PhD in biochemistry, I think. And one thing that's really important is that when we study a particular discipline, that we stay in our lane. And we see with Abu Iyad, for example, and this is a totally different topic, which I don't think I'm fully qualified to get into. I'm not going to research it. There are others who will come in that lane who are more specialized in that lane. In that his biochemistry, he believes makes him qualified to give advice with regards to medical issues, and his disparagement of conventional medicine because he wants to push his only understanding of alternative complementary medicines to such an extent that he's advised cancer patients, okay? He's advised cancer patients to their detriment, and Allah knows best. And I say this with personal knowledge of particular cases, but I'm going off at a tangent. I won't go down that road. But the thing I'm trying to highlight here is with certain specialisms, us in particular, us lay people, we must stay in our lanes. And my PhD qualification and what I'm talking about is because I'm qualified to talk about this because of the study that I've done in this particular field and the qualification I've obtained. So coming back to the social sciences, trying to make out that this has come from a non-Muslim discipline. In actuality, when I spoke about ideological and behavioral extremism, okay, belief-related and deed-related extremism, I was referring to the works of Dr. Abdurrahman ibn Mu'alla al-Lawahiq al-Mutayri, an individual who graduated from Muhammad ibn Saud Islamic University, and his master's degree, which has been translated, was on religious extremism in the lives of contemporary Muslims. And he went back to a very focal point of extremism in the annals of Islamic history, that of when Dhul Khuwaisira attacked the Prophet ﷺ verbally and accused him of being unjust. And he referred to the behavior of Dhul Khuwaisira at that time and saying this was a defining moment for behavioral extremism. I agreed with that, but disagreed with his observation there wasn't ideological extremism. And I developed that strand further, saying that ideological extremism emanated from his statement, his very statement, because it showed his belief, the accusation that the Prophet ﷺ was unjust. So that's where that particular aspect of social science was rooted. And we know from the academics, Muslim and non-Muslim, some of them have taken from Islamic sciences when they're talking about groupthink, which we will call Hezbiya. And Hezbiya, I think, is more talking about partisanship. I'm talking about cultism because it's a much more deeper and worrying ill that has affected Salafis in this particular instance. So that's where the social science aspect emanated from. Now, Abu Iyad also accuses me and goes back to others. He talks about Idris Palmer. From what I remember, as I said, I only skimmed through the paper. It's not something scholastic to skim through, but he talks about Idris Palmer and others accusing others of cultism. But it's okay for him, it's okay for Abu Iyad on al-Hajuri.com to accuse Yahya al-Hajuri of being Haddadiyya, which is a cult. You will all agree, Haddadiyya is a cult. And I'll quote from his website. And as Yahya al-Hajuri, then he went into the other direction, that of Haddadiyya, in brackets, extremism and exaggeration, showing great harshness to the scholars of Ahl Sunnah and their followers. Here, this is his description. Extremism and exaggeration, showing great harshness to the scholars of Ahl Sunnah and their followers. Now, if that's not the pot calling the kettle black, I don't know what is. So that's his own quote. So what's good for the goose is invariably good for the gander. So yes, that is cultism. Haddadiyya, as is what we're seeing from this particular cult that I've described. He goes on to talk about aligning ourselves in the 90s with Abdurrahman Abdul Khaliq and not having a love for scholars, Sheikh Ibn Baz and Uthaymin. But let's look at something really specific here. And I'm going to read from one of the papers that one of my brothers and colleagues did years ago, a call from the towers about the ignorance of Yusuf Bowers. When Yusuf Bowers did this really disingenuous lecture about the history of Salafiyah. So in his lecture, Bowers mentions that, mashallah, our brother who started in 93, was the chairman in 93, Abu Sufyan, Hafizahullah. He said that Abu Sufyan had stopped all of Ahl al-Bidah, the Sururiyin and Kutubiyin, doing any type of lessons and any type of dawah in Brixton. This was Yusuf Bowers' statement. But if that was the case, we know that during his tenure, Abdurrahman Abdul Khaliq and Ali Tamimi were invited to Brixton in 1993. And in the Masjid Objectives, which were produced by our brother in 1993, he said to those who were present, and we have the recordings, that these objectives were certified by Albani and Ali Hassan, the main student of Sheikh Nasruddin Albani, Sheikh Jibali, Sheikh Ali Tamimi, Sheikh Abdullah Al-Farsi, Sheikh Abdurrahman Abdul Khaliq, and Sheikh Abdullah As-Sabt. This was then. So when he's talking about Abdurrahman Abdul Khaliq, during my tenure, which was 1994, past that time, I didn't invite Abdurrahman Abdul Khaliq. So why are you referring to Abdurrahman Abdul Khaliq, his students and their dawah? I had nothing to do with them. Your colleague who's with you was the one who invited them. And when referring to love of the scholars or our lack of love of the scholars, you have another individual among you who made some heinous statements which have been yet to be recanted about Sheikh Ibn Baz and Sheikh Uthaymin. And I'll speak of none other than Dr. Abdulillah Lahmami, when in the 90s, mid to late 90s, when he was studying under a Sri Lankan student called Yahya Silmi, he showed me the book and he showed his colleagues who were in the emerging cult of Maktaba Salafiyah, statements that he was learning that Sheikh Ibn Baz and Sheikh Uthaymin were not Salafi. He actually showed me the introduction of a book in Arabic. I don't read Arabic. And he showed me, and he read it in Arabic, and then he said to me, they are not Salafi. This was Sheikh Uthaymin's book. They are not, he is not Salafi, he is Hanbali. Now, years later, I asked him, would he recant? We sat in Sheikh Rabi's when we were having arbitration, and he was with Abdul Razak As-Sanani after Jummah one day, and I challenged him and said, I'm going to bring this up to the Sheikh, that this is what you said about Sheikh Ibn Baz and Sheikh Uthaymin. And he was not happy about me saying that, and he said that I was young and foolish in those days. But he could say that to me, but did he recant it publicly? So when these accusations are coming about love of the scholars, lack of love of the scholars, and the like, Amjad needs to do more research. The cult needs to really try and cover its tracks as it does and really unturn every stone for some of the statements that is made. And I have emails that were sent to me which used to be shared between myself and Abu Khadija when we listed the scholars. We were putting a statement out against a sorority group that used to be on the internet, and we were talking about how we would compile the email, and Abu Khadija wrote and said, let's say this, and he wrote it, and I shared it with the brothers in Brixton, and he listed a whole raft of scholars. This was in 2000. And in those scholars included those who they attack now. Abul Hassan, who no one follows now and hasn't followed and hasn't adhered to for many, many years. And many of you don't even know the issue of Abul Hassan from 20 years ago. Please listen to my other recording, and the documentation is there. The documentation is there. I'm not going to be waylaid by that. But I will conclude at this particular point. I don't want to go on, and I'll be doing more recordings. But when this cult, I reiterate what I said in the beginning, whenever this cult is attacked or criticized, they come back with abuse, real abuse at various levels, because they have to preserve their brand. They have to preserve their following. And the one issue that I will conclude on is when I'm being accused of being a liar, because what they've done now, if they've taken Sheikh Mohammed ibn Hadi's slander against me and Brixton by saying we were untruthful. And I know it caused a big furore afterwards when I said I wrote to the Sheikh Hafidahullah, privately, which I haven't disclosed that letter because of my respect for the Sheikh. If he's disclosed it to this cult, then that's for him to do that. But I asked for evidence of what I hadn't abided by or adhered to in accordance with this accusation that he made against me, because I only met the Sheikh 3 times, and I don't speak Arabic, and he doesn't speak English. So the only thing he had asked me on one occasion was to go and visit Sheikh, to go and visit, not Sheikh, sorry. He said about going to see Abu Khadija when I got back to the UK for vacation. And I was reluctant to do it because I thought it'd be a waste of time. Anyway, he persuaded me, he convinced me to do it. And I did. And there wasn't any translator between the two of us because one of our brothers, I won't mention him now because he's shy, was teaching his son English in the next room. And he said, let you and me speak. Let's see if we can work out understanding each other. And it was very difficult for us to understand each other. He got the gist of some of what I said. I got snippets of what he said. But he wanted me to visit Abu Khadija. And as I left, I said, okay, Sheikh, I'll go and visit him. When I got to the UK a few days later, I was only there for about 4 days. I tried to get in touch to meet and come up and see Abu Khadija, and said that Sheikh Mohammed ibn Hadi had asked me to do that. I'm not sure who it was I spoke to. It may have been Yusuf, not Yusuf, Yunus. He's a tall brother, really nice brother I used to like, mashallah. I don't know what he's up to now. And he said he was busy and all the days he couldn't make it. They were traveling around the Midlands giving dawah. Anyway, so I couldn't do that visit. Then I heard later on the Sheikh kept saying I told Abdul Haqq to do something, he hadn't done it. And I asked the brothers to convey a message to the Sheikh. I tried to visit Abu Khadija. That's the only thing that I can remember regarding Sheikh Mohammed. So when he made this statement, which was one which was without evidence, without substantiation, I asked the Sheikh privately, you've said something, I believe I've been slandered, can you give me the evidence? And if not, because none of us are above the Sharia, I'm going to look at my right in this land of Tawheed, which is Sharia based, and take it to court, which is what I did. And the brothers were like, oh, how can Abdul Haqq do this? How can Abdul Haqq do that? So based on what the Sheikh had said about Brixton not being truthful, myself and Abdul Rahman Anderson, and Abdul Rahman Anderson has to speak for himself because I don't know what he said to the Sheikh, and if he's made promises or whatever, then I don't know about them. But based on that, you have sisters in Manchester and Twitter to Abu Iyad, the liar, and such like. But Ikhwan, sisters, really, we've got to be really careful here, because Allah really does make things clear. And we know subsequent to that, that our Sheikh, Mohammed ibn Hadi, was taken to court by Sheikh Ibrahim al-Ruhaili. And the results of that were known. The results of that were known, again, for slander and being found guilty, and measures were then implemented and ordered against the Sheikh and a European individual. They were not implemented to the extent that prison and the punishments were prescribed, because there was some agreement, and from what the knowledge that I have is that they were commuted. What the sentencing was commuted, and an agreement was signed by the two shuyukh. But none of you from the cult would admit, acknowledge, or accept that. You will bring statements, funnily enough, like the Takfiris. When anyone has been taken to court or been in prison, they refer to Shaykh al-Islam, Ibn Taymiyyah, and this happened to the Salaf and everything. This cultish mentality really distorts the reality of things. So coming back to that, the Shaykh has never come back and given evidence of what he said. MashaAllah, I stopped my court proceedings because I felt the statement was enough to show that I was serious, and greater than me went to court on the issue and got justice, mashallah, tabarakallah. So that's the issue. I've never spoken about it openly, but the cult has spoken about it behind closed doors to other individuals. How could Abdul Haqq have done this and such like? But I'm in the land of Tawheed, and Allah tells us in the Quran that evil shouldn't be spoken in public except for the one who has been done wrong, who has been oppressed. And I was the recipient of that oppression, in my opinion, and I sought advice from other shuyukh, and suffice it to say that I took the action that I did. I'll end on this point now. It's nearly 20 minutes long, and no doubt the cult will come back, unpick what I've said here, and come with different angles. This is all they can do. This is the cult mentality. They've got to keep their base. Much like Trump, they preach to the converted. They're not bringing anyone new upon what they're there or what they're upon. They have to speak to their base. They have to show that they're showing due diligence, and everyone else who attacks and criticizes them are astray and wrong. And finally, I keep saying finally, but things keep coming back to me. This is not indirectly directed at Sheikh Rabi', as has been inferred by Abu Iyad. He's stretching this tangent so far, it's desperate, it's almost laughable. I visited Sheikh Rabi' little over a week ago, on the day of his operation. He hadn't been to Jeddah for a long time, and I went with Mohammed Maliki and another brother, mashallah, from the UK. So at the end of the day, if this was against Sheikh Rabi', and Allah is a witness to this, I would not have visited Sheikh Rabi' in hospital and found his son downstairs, Professor Muhammad, because he wasn't allowed upstairs because the Sheikh had just had the operation and he had to stay downstairs. We met him, he told the Sheikh was recovering well, but he won't be able to be visited for 2 days. So we spoke, had niceties, and then we left. And I'll end it there. So those who are part of the cult, I don't expect you to be listening at all because you're cult members, you're diseased in that way, and may Allah give you guidance. Other listeners, it's for you to discern what has been said in this discourse and listen back to my other discourse. And if you even have the time to read the 19-page rant and compare it to the other rants, then hopefully the truth will become clear to you. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.